62 billion and supporting 1.3 million jobs, according to the report by the UK Fashion and Textile Association and Oxford Economics. But fashion is one of the most resource-intensive industries on the planet. From the raw materials used to the energy and water consumed to the waste generator end of life, fashion plays a really significant role in driving climate change and biodiversity loss. But as one of the world's most iconic fashion capitals, London has a particularly unique opportunity with this. And with bold leadership, creativity and collaboration, this city can actually set an international example moving forward towards a circular design, zero waste practices, and a far low carbon fashion economy. So as I said, if you do have, it would be really welcome to have you put your names and contact details in the chat, and we will try and follow up with you after this presentation. I think this is going to be really interesting. I think there's a really broad series of areas covered here. Like anything like this subject, there are no magic bullets to resolve a situation, but there's a lot of different angles that we're going to be exploring. So first of all, I'd like to welcome our panel. And this morning we have, in no particular order, we have Dr. Lynn Wilson from Scotland. We have Nishant Parak from KAPDAA, who is currently waiting a flight. So if Nish happens to get a call, we may say goodbye to Nish, but we welcome Nishant. We have Councillor Ian Manders, we have Professor Virginia Grose, and we have Professor Vasileios Argyriou. I'm sorry, Vasileios, I'm so rubbish with names, so my apologies if I've really mangled that one up. So first of all, can I just let the panelists introduce themselves first? Can I start with you, Vasileios, first? Just briefly say your name, your organisation, and actually what has inspired your involvement in sustainable fashion. But if we can be fairly quick, then we can get into the meaty subjects which we want to discuss. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Vasileios Argyriou. I'm a professor at Kingston University, London. The background is mainly on artificial intelligence, computer vision, and robotics. And the reasons we are working on textile industry is mainly on recycling, because the technology, the AI vision, and these solutions can automate a lot of processes. And this way we can improve and increase the recycling process.
Lovely, thank you. And some really eye-opening details which he will share a little bit later. Can I come to you next, Virginia, and then to Nish? Thank you.
Hi, yes, I'm head of the School of Arts at the University of Westminster, and that includes fashion, arts, textiles, music. In our school, I've spent 20 years in the fashion industry before moving into academia, working in design, product development, and global manufacturing, and really that has really led to my interest and my research into sustainability in the fashion supply chain.
Lovely. Welcome, Virginia. Can I turn to Nish?
Hi, everyone. Thanks a lot, Forbes, for allowing me to leave a bit early, if I get the call.
We may not have a choice.
My name's Nish. I'm the co-founder at KAPDAA. We run a sustainable AI business where we have created an AI system which detects and sorts the garments, unwearable garments or used garments. And the key part is it is on the back of a trailer, so we can drive to the waste rather than the waste being sent to us. And the entire system runs on solar panels.
Brilliant. I in all seriousness, really appreciate you managing to make this space available. So thank you so much. Councillor Ian Manders.
Yeah, thanks, Forbes. I'm Ian Manders. I'm the portfolio holder at Kingston Council for climate action, biodiversity and planning policy. In terms of why we're concerned about fashion waste, is that we as a local authority collect domestic waste, and it's about just over 3% of our waste. And we have carbon targets that long-term carbon targets is what we need to meet, but in the short term, it's a financial issue for us because we don't get really very much from recycling, and an awful lot of waste anyway goes into the dustbins, and we can't recycle it from there. So for us, the driver is basically saving money by less waste, more reuse, and also more recycling.
Thank you, Ian, and we'll come on to a little bit more about what is happening locally a little bit later. Thank you. And finally, to Lynn.
Thank you very much. I'm Dr. Lynn Wilson. I'm an independent academic researcher in consumer behaviour and particularly clothing behaviour. And I am a consultant. I have a consultancy practice, Circular Design Synergy, and we focus on the transition, the business transition, industry transition to circularity. I initially trained as a textile designer, and I worked freelance across the industry, but I also worked in international development, setting up textile vocational training units in sub-Saharan Africa, and that really wakened my senses and my experience of global vulnerability of resources, which is why I'm so passionately committed to the transition to sustainability and circularity, and particularly in supporting consumers to change behaviour and to work to transition to clothing circularity. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Lynn. Thank you. Okay, I think where we should start first is kind of just get kind of a much broader view from our panelists and their perspectives. So the question really I would like to ask them, and I'll come to Nish first, if that's okay, is what is the most pressing environmental issue caused by the fashion industry today from your perspective? I'll come to Nish first, and then I'll come on to Virginia afterwards. Thank you.
I think we don't have, according to me, we don't have enough solutions to the end-of-life garments at the moment. One of the key ones which has been done for years is to send the garments to other countries where they're reworn. But I think because of manufacturing everywhere in the world, the second-hand garment market is also kind of reducing. So we need to find innovative solutions within the UK or within the country to recycle them.
Thank you, Nish. Virginia, and then I'll come to Ian afterwards.
Thank you. Thank you, Forbes. I don't usually like one-word answers, but I've got one. Overproduction. There is too much stuff being made all over the world, and consumers are buying too much, and there is not enough solutions to deal with the mountain. It doesn't even begin to describe it, but overproduction has to be tackled at scale. At scale.
Thank you. That's good. Lovely. So can I come on to Ian, and then I'll come on to Vasileios and then Lynn afterwards. Ian.
Yeah, I completely agree with the last speaker. I mean, the main problem is that there's just too much of it. Certainly, as far as we're concerned as a local authority, and we all know there are problems with fast fashion. You know, the environmental issues such as the amount of energy which is used, fossil fuel energy, and the amount of water which is used in the production of textiles and then clothing. We also know that in many cases, the people who work in the industries are treated really quite badly on a very low wage, and their conditions are very poor. What that results in then is ultra cheap garments, which are again exported, you know, to Britain using polluting ships, and then they're used. You know, they last a season, if that, and then they're disposed of, and then it ends up basically with the local authority having to clear away at the cost of the taxpayer. So that's the lack of circularity really there, which is the issue as far as I'm concerned. So, and as I said in my introduction, it's the carbon emissions, but it's also the human conditions, and it's also the cost of disposal.
Thank you, Ian. Vasileios, and then Lynn.
Yeah, I think along the same line with the previous speakers, it's overproduction. We consume too much. Plus, the whole cycle has problems across all the steps. First, the recycling processes are not automated, so automation is one big problem. Recycling with chemicals needs to be improved. The supply chains is too long. And since UK and Europe relies to countries outside, we start to lack innovation in the technology in this sector. And that's what we try also to improve in UK with NIS and this kind of technologies.
Thank you. But I think, and quite a lot of these points will come to Dr. Lynn. We will be kind of addressing these a little bit later on. So the behavior, about client behavior, the innovation of technology, these will be weaved into the conversation a bit later. Dr. Lynn, on your perspective, which will probably echo what the people have said, but
so much. So yeah, absolutely, supply and demand. But for me, the key challenge started a long time ago, and I think it's summed up by Charles Revson. So Charles Revson was the founder of ReLondon Beauty, and he said, women don't buy lipstick, they buy hope. And the problem we have with this overproduction, overconsumption is marketing. And marketing rules the world. And then we have marketing combined with social media, and we have a world that just wants image, it wants hope, and it thinks hope is through consumption. So overproduction is led by demand, and demand is led by production. So we're in this feedback loop of despair. And until we really address marketing, greenwashing, society, this is a societal problem that goes deep into the core of we have forgotten what the purpose of clothing is. And so for me, yeah, what are we actually marketing? What are we actually buying? And what are we expecting consumers to do? So why is clothing not clothing? It's a design fault. It's not working for people. That's why we're over consuming, because it's not working. Thank you.
So to kind of follow on that, really, in terms of, I guess the biggest gap with the fashion circularity is the intention in the implementation is really sort of the consumer's expectation, and then sort of well, that it's really about the consumer behavior, isn't it? And I quite like that element you put in about the hope. So there's a lot of mechanisms there, but that seems to be the biggest gap. Would you say that's fair? Or where would you say that is?
Yeah, so what we do at the moment is we problematize consumers and we put all the responsibility onto consumers, but we are actually accumulating a resource. I mean, up to 30% of the average wardrobe is never worn, but we're treated as, we're demonized. Consumers are demonized rather than thought of as, my goodness, we have a resource. What are we doing with that resource? Industry thinking about that relationship. Degrowth needs to happen. And in order for degrowth to happen, it needs a synergy between producers and consumers. We need to really have a deep, meaningful relationship. And that is completely broken right now. And it's just completely pivoted on marketing. So the issue is that the market is terrified of this word of degrowth, because it doesn't want to spend the time to think about the creativity and the mechanisms and the creativity to, it's easier to think about end of life. It's easier to think about the mechanisms for end of life than to address degrowth and the innovation and technology and creativity that is needed for degrowth. And it's how we pivot that market opportunity, how we market degrowth with innovation and creativity to create where we should be in a really wonderful space of clothing as function and creative practice for everyone.
Thank you, Lynn. I want to come back to a phrase you've used, that sort of end of life element, because it's about the second time it's kind of been raised here already. Virginia, can I come to just your view on that as well? Because you obviously have worked in this area quite intensively.
Sure. I mean, totally agree with everything Lynn said, and degrowth is absolutely the way that we've got to move forward, and recycling and circularity is part of that. It's not about, we don't need to keep producing more and more and more, and we don't need to keep using virgin materials either. And that's one of the problems that we have, is this complete oversaturation of absolutely everything. You know, circularity can really help us treat waste as a resource, and that's what we've got to get to, and that's what we're trying to embed in our students. Waste at the beginning of the fashion design process is a resource, and it's a resource at the end as well. But it's not enough for designers to just look at that. The big brands have got to really harness that I'm going to use the word at scale again, because it's this scaling up that is needed. So waste is a resource, that's my message, and that's very much linked to degrowth.
Thank you, Virginia. Because I'm aware that Niche is in transit, I'm going to slightly reorder a few things here, but this does segue quite nicely to Niche's particular work and operations regarding the word resource. So Niche, I mean, can you just share with us sort of the impact that your business has on the garment recycling and repurposing? There's a lot which you do using that process as a resource. Can you just go through that for us?
Yeah, sure. So we work with both aspects, the post-consumer and pre-consumer waste as well. We started in pre-consumer waste. The key element, what I have found for over a period of time, is that the brands and the fashion industry wants to do new things, are keen on innovation, but they don't want to take onus of everything on them. They want someone to do it for them at a very low cost. That's what it is. And that is what we have found our kind of expertise is. When we go in, when it comes to pre-consumer waste, we create new products, but we create it and we give it back to them. So what happens then is that the brands themselves can show that how what kind of steps they are taking in sustainability. And in terms of the recycling side of it, again, they need solutions. They are happy. I've been on a lot of calls and a lot of meetings. They are happy to take a bit of step, but as I said, it has to be at reasonable price, and only then they would be happy to kind of join hands. And otherwise, they'll find the easy solution of saying, pack it up, bale it, put it on a pallet, and it's not our problem, it's someone else's problem.
So would you say is one of the biggest hurdles for you as a sustainable fashion startup has been this costing issue?
Yes, till we scale up, that is the key. So now what we're looking at is, earlier we were very design focused, very kind of innovation, small niches, products which we were making, which we still do, is a part of our business. But the recycling side is more on the scale, because there is tonnage which is out there on an every single day which goes out. Just an example, a couple of weeks ago I was at the recycling center, and they sent out 2,000 tons just from their 2 sites in a week. Just to give you an indication, 1 ton is around 2,000 garments, and that includes everything, right from knickers to socks to wearables to non-wearables, all kinds of things.
And that's in 1 week?
That's in 1 week from 2 sites, and there are more than 50-60 sites in this country itself.
Gosh, those are big numbers. Thank you. In terms of, I want to come back in terms of just your innovations and local collaborations, but Vasileios, you've worked with KAPDAA and Niche developing AI technology for fashion sustainability. You talked about it a little bit earlier, but what is the emerging tech utilizing AI which can help reduce the waste carbon fashion supply chain? What's going on? You came up with some amazing data last time that we chatted on this.
In the project we are working with NIST and KAPDAA is mainly focused on automation on the sorting process, like to separate different textile materials, different clothes, detect zippers and buttons that needs to be removed. And this is a kind of a process that is essential for the recycling, before going to the recycling. Automating this one is quite important task. But in the next few years, we're moving to a new kind of processing of this kind of tasks, and it's going to go to a full automation. There are many factories in other continents that are have full automated pipelines, and you can automate the process, lowering the cost, and of course allowing to recycle very large amounts of clothes. So that's the way that is we're looking to go for the future, and it's probably going to be local. It's local for local. We want everything to be in the same location, both the sorting, the recycling, and the printing of the clothes at the end.
There was a combination though, Nish and Vasileios, in terms of, and it's eye-opening to me, was just the, I think, you probably correct me if I'm wrong, in terms of actually be able to sort of look at the product and actually think, this is the zip, this is the button, this is, you could break down what came through to you. And that's the use of the innovation. So it just helps you process that a lot quicker. Is that correct?
Yeah, there are many problems. One is this one, to detect and recognize the materials from different sensors, normal cameras, multispectral cameras. And the other thing is that we need to advance the textile manipulation, because some textiles are not in the right shape or position when we analyze them. So it is important to manipulate the clothes. So that's the two of the main problems we are dealing at the moment. And we are focusing now on the manipulation part, because it's a quite difficult task and unsolved at this stage.
So in terms of the tech which you've developed so far, the zips and the buttons, the tech is there to help sort that out. And are you saying that the technology to look at the different fibers is still in progress, or is it? It's a tech.
No, Nisha and the team already built the platform there. It is working, supports many textile materials. Yeah, the manipulation of textiles will improve the accuracy of the textile recognition, because some materials may have, some clothes may have different materials, different layers, so it helps to recognize them better.
Brilliant. Nish, okay, again, I just checked, but I didn't realize polymer was was a real issue, and also the mixed fibers for you. So you've talked about sort of the monofiber and the different elements in clothing itself. Polymer, you said, is about 30% of clothing is made up of polymers, which is, that end of life element is really challenging.
It is. If it's 100%, it's not a problem. The problem occurs when, as soon as you have 95/5, you have 80/20, because then that is what people don't want to kind of recycle, because we don't have the facilities or the innovation, that skill, to kind of either break them down chemically or mechanically, and have a large scale solution. So it's okay to have 100% cottons, 100% polyesters, but as soon as you get into 60% cottons, 20% polyesters, 5% nylon, 10% spandex, it all becomes very, very difficult. And then to get high quality recycling end products also makes it difficult. And hence our solution first scans and sorts sort of as per the fiber composition. So it tells you whether it's 100% cotton, 60% cotton, so on. And also what Vasileios' work which you're doing is also detects the zippers and the buttons, because that also helps us that, okay, we don't need to process all the garments through the next phase. If they don't have zippers and buttons, it's easy to break them down compared to the ones which have zippers and the buttons. So I think it's a step-by-step process. But I think I agree with Vasileios that it has to be more of a local solution. We can't ship our waste somewhere else and expect them to do it, because even they don't have the technology or the innovation at scale to work with blends.
And a final question before we move on a little bit. In terms of some of the work which you've done, you've helped looking at how to repurpose a lot of these things into sort of things like underlay for carpets, insulation. Could you just explain a little bit more how that process has worked?
Yeah, so the key element is that it doesn't stop at sorting. You know, you can scan, you can gather data of which material it is, and then you sort it, all of them together. But what do you do after that? As I said, there are solutions for 100% cottons, 100% polyesters, but as soon as the mixed blends comes, no one wants to do it. So what we took as a challenge working with University of Leeds and their textile department is to try and work out how do we work with these mixed blends. So we've broken them down. We've then added some other binders to it, and then we've come with a solution. So we can have the consistency of the fibers from our sorting side. So we know for a fact that all of these have 80% cotton, 20% polyester. And then we add another binder to it. And then we create end products, which we now send for testing with British standards as well. We got some positive results. We're now looking at making a large scale production up in Leeds, which then allows us to get official certification. So it's building that circular system within one place where it's easy to go in and out. So
brilliant, thank you.
Anyway, I do have to leave. I think
that's your last question. You're free to go. Have a safe flight.
Thanks a lot, guys. Sorry.
Cheers. Mind yourself. Thanks, Nish. So can I come to Ian, because a part of what Nish and Vasileios were saying was sort of getting this local element of how we can make this happen more locally. So Ian, what are there current policies or initiatives that Kingston is trying to implement to reduce the fashion and textile waste and just bring these things a little bit more manageable, closer to home? Are you able to share a few thoughts on this, please?
Yeah, well, the first thing is that we're supporting Nish's projects to help them move from the pre-production stage really to something which is commercially viable, and we're doing that because we recognise it is a very worthwhile initiative. I mean, the thing about Nish's product is that it sorts the textiles out, as you said, locally. So we could have a facility like that at our waste collection site. So I mean, just a reminder, when your dustbins are collected from your house, they don't go, as it were, straight to the municipal waste incinerator. They go to a collection point, and there's an opportunity then for some sorting, and also it's a place where residents bring their waste, usually in their cars. And so a facility like that, where we're actually sorting out on site into the various value streams effectively, that would be very helpful. At the moment anyway, any textiles we have, they're sent away, and we're told that they are processed and reused and recycled, but I'd much rather do that while we can actually see it happening. So that's the first thing. I mean, two, we do try and attempt to educate the public. I mean, the main issue with fashion waste is it's not one of those continuous things like your food packaging, or your waste foods, something like that, which you put out almost daily or at least every other day. It only happens from time to time, and that's often a difficult thing to get into people's heads, as it were, what they do with that. So we put that information obviously on our website, and then part of our general initiatives really with the public about reducing carbon and reducing waste and recycling waste. But it's a difficult one, mainly because it's occasional. It's about the figures I've seen anyway. It's textiles, and I take it it's also including footwear in that as well, is about 2.1% of the domestic waste stream. So that's a lot smaller than some of the other things that we collect as a local authority, and that's why something like Nish's facility is so helpful, is the fact that it gives us a ready-made process on the spot that we can use.
But even as Nish said, is that the demand and what comes through in 1 week is significantly a high figure, isn't it? So the percentage might be small, but still the quantity coming in is quite high.
Yeah, no, well, overall it does, over a year. Now, I don't want anyone to quote this figure because this is literally the back of an envelope figure, but I reckon we probably, at Kingston, we probably, collect about 1,700 tonnes of textile and footwear waste in a year, and that's from domestic, waste. Now, I don't want anyone to write that figure down because I need to check it. It's literally, I've been doing that off the back of national statistics and over our own population. So that's quite a lot. But of course, that trickles in, if you see what I mean. That if you turned up with a lorry load with over 1,000 tonnes of something, then that is significant. But we're obviously, that's the day in, day out, kind of over a lot of time. So we do have ways of dealing with it, but it comes back, I think, in the end to the point that other speakers have made about the sheer quantity. We really need to get down the quantity. We do not want people to put textiles into the waste stream if they can possibly help it.
One final question on this is, Kingston is one borough, and I pay a lot of tribute to yourself and to Joanna for really kind of raising the profile of all the sustainability agenda across the borough. You've done a tremendous amount of work in the last 2 to 3 years in particular, but there's a lot of consultation with our neighbours in terms of the South London Partnership and that broader area. Can you see a kind of a more consolidated approach coming across in the South London? Because we can do a lot, but is there kind of transferable skills so much in terms of resources, innovation, that do you think there's a journey there we can explore?
Yeah, well, we do have a connection because we are all reliant on, for the waste that we can't recycle, we're reliant on well, we call it an energy from waste plant, but it's what would have been called in the past a municipal waste incinerator. So we're so, the waste that we can't recycle is burnt, and it is used for electricity, and I'm hoping that they're going to also use the heat off the process to heat local housing, but that's something that's coming along. So we've all got an interest in that, and we all pay gate fees to this energy from waste plant. So we're all interested in getting down the cost of the amount of our gate fees. So there is an interest there between us, and there's certainly informal work going on. And Kingston has, a lot of contact with its neighbours in Sutton and in Richmond. So yeah, I think lessons can be learned. Local authorities don't compete against each other. We do cooperate with our neighbours, and I'm certainly willing to learn from any local authority that's got a solution to this. And we're doing innovation, of course, with ourselves.
Yeah. No, and I think there must be many who can actually learn from what Kingston is trying to do. But I think increasingly these collaborations are going to continue pulling everything up even further and quicker. Thank you, Ian. I just want to now kind of, so we've looked a little bit at the innovation side. There's a couple of questions I've got for Vasileios a little bit later. But I just want to come on to the more sort of what we've called the corporate and policy intersections. And I quite like this phrase, intersections, because that's exactly what it is. It's how these things are kind of crossing over. And one of the policy levers, which is called the Extended Producer Responsibility, or EPR, which is a good acronym, keeps it nice and short, which is about textile waste bans or incentives for encouraging fashion circularity. So can I come to Lynn and to Virginia just on this, in terms of what would a circular fashion economy financially look like? Can it actually be made viable? And I think that's, how do we get from the theory into the practical with this? So I'll start with Lynn and then to Virginia, please.
So much. So corporate and policy interface. So extended producer responsibility puts the responsibility on the producer for end of life.
putting a QR code on a label so you could scan it and see directly how it's been made up.
Yes, thank you, Forbes. Yes, and there's much information. We don't exactly know how much information a digital product passport can have, but it can certainly have a lot more support for consumers that will then also engage in EPR. We also have in Europe right to repair legislation. And so in terms of countries like France, where they have put funding behind right to repair legislation. So there is I think it's a 1.5 million euro consumer campaign that gives consumers vouchers in order to help them access repair services. So extended producer responsibility is one policy vehicle, but there are several coming along the line that working in tandem and sort of collaboratively, we can really start to see change. Can I just make a point though? Sorry, I just wanted to go back to Councillor Manders, because a key challenge is in terms of volume versus carbon. So I used to work for Zero Waste Scotland. Zero Waste Scotland's a national organisation funded by Scottish Government to implement circularity in Scotland. So they did research into the relationship between waste volume and carbon. So in Scotland, only 4% of clothing is binned in the household bin, but they estimated that it comes up at 31% of carbon emissions. So clothing in the household domestic bin is 32% of carbon emissions. So what they're saying is, whilst the volume is very, very low, and in Kingston, well done, it's even lower, 2.1%. When we calculate carbon emissions, when we have all of these different materials, chemical materials mixing with food waste, that's when we get this vast expulsion of carbon. And so that's why it's a real conundrum for local authorities. And I really enjoy listening to Councillor Manders. I think that your knowledge and approach is really, it's great that you're so knowledgeable about this and want to take action. And really, it is about how we support consumers to be really aware of all of these policy mechanisms, but also what is the problem? Overconsumption is one problem, but what is carbon? And I know that there's some fantastic people on this call who work on carbon literacy and are carbon literacy experts. And these are the kind of things at a local level that really help translate European, UK environmental policy into local action by really helping that interface between these big policies that don't really mean that much for local people, but how do you translate it into the household? And so, yeah, sorry, just wanted to make that point. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Can I just come back on that? Well, of course, local authorities, the whole, as it were, metric for waste is actually weight rather than carbon.
Oh, so I know.
So what we're always interested in is how much something weighs, because there's a direct, financial cost to that.
But Manders, can I just say, sorry, that what that means is that when it comes to government spending and local spending, it goes on the volume problem rather than the carbon problem. And so in the UK, the sustainable and circular clothing campaigners, industry, people in that space are utterly frustrated because of this really important issue of volume when it comes to food waste. but this lack of really accepting that the key issue with clothing and disposal is carbon. So just an appeal to you to have a wee think about that.
No, I quite agree. And if I could turn around the ship of state on this, I would certainly like to. I mean, waste policy in the UK is really, well, initially really was driven by the fact that we were running out of landfill. We were running out of holes in the ground to bury our waste. And that's where waste recycling was encouraged, and also government also encouraged municipal waste incineration as well. So there's been a lot more municipal waste incinerators built over the last few years. But I quite agree, the focus hasn't been on carbon, and perhaps it should be, but then we'd have to work out, as it were, how local authorities can be paid. I mean, we don't have a carbon tax in this country like many other countries. That would put a direct price on the actual carbon in each product that it appears, but the government hasn't gone down that road. There are some, carbon mechanisms, and also waste is going to be part of the carbon trading scheme in 2028. So there will then be some incentive in local authorities to look at carbon content. But before then, I wouldn't have thought that unless there's preparation for that, the focus is still going to be on weight.
Thank you, Ian. Thank you, Lynn, for asking the question. Before we come to Virginia, can I just pick up there's people here on the call who are probably way more learned than me, but could you succinctly describe what you mean by carbon literacy? You mentioned it when you just a couple of minutes ago. Would you mind just defining what carbon literacy is from your perspective?
I think there's, as I said, there's attendees on here that are much more qualified to give a succinct answer to that. But in terms of carbon literacy, it's really about helping everyone to understand what exactly creates the environmental problem. So helping to understand how pollution is created, how the problems of a product, how the environmental issues are created, to help us to understand how impact occurs. How does environmental impact occur through the expulsion of carbon? So if you, and for most of us, that's irrelevant in our daily lives. But if we can help people be more aware of how actually environmental pollution occurs, then they can be much more aware of their purchasing behaviour, of how they make their choices, how they shop. And so carbon literacy is very much about raising our awareness.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Lynn. Virginia, just to go back, because we've gone a little bit more in depth there, and just to come from your side of it again, would you like to expand on sort of what you see from your side the circular fashion economy would look like financially, and can it really be made viable? Do you think this is realistic?
Yeah, I think it's realistic. Obviously, like everything, we need investment, but we do need a national infrastructure in the UK for recycling textiles, and there is an opportunity for that because there are many expert recyclers around the country, but we need to create more of a supply chain of recycling for textile waste. In fact, in terms of the extended producer responsibility legislation, at the moment in the UK, I believe it only extends to packaging waste. And in Europe, there are parts of Europe, as Lynn's mentioned, where that's different. France notably, but also Hungary, Latvia and the Netherlands, they've got EPR schemes that are enforced, that are much more strongly enforced than ours. And I'm very keen to work with the UK Fashion and Textiles Organisation, which I am doing, to lobby this government, any government actually, it doesn't matter whether it's this one or another one. We need extended producer responsibility. I've got to the point with recycling and circularity and the issues in the fashion industry where I think legislation's the only way to change things now. And I didn't used to think that, and a lot of people in the industry didn't used to think that, but the problem's too large. As Councillor Manders has expanded and Lynn has expanded, you know, we've really got to tackle this at scale. And, you know, just to give you another example from Europe, in France, they're doing much more to tackle the fast fashion brands, a bit more draconian, possibly, but, you know, they've created what they're calling a kill bill that targets fast fashion brands sold online to ban the advertising of those brands in France and penalise them with you know, financial penalties per article of clothing by 2030, and that'll also mandate the fast fashion retailers to include the items reuse, repair, recycling and environmental impact alongside. It'll probably be part of this the digital product passport scheme. So we need to get ahead in the UK. And
can I just go back to those two things? I'm interested to, I'm going slightly sideways, but it's interesting. I mean, to have a country like France, but combined with a smaller country like Latvia, there's clearly a small country can do it, no offense, and you've got a very large European country which does it. What do you think are the main levers which sort of think we must go and do it? What do you think has managed to get them from thinking about it to doing it? Is that fair to ask you? I'm just curious. You mentioned them thinking, what got them over the line with this?
Okay, I think we'll start to get into geopolitics if we're not careful, and I'm no expert.
Enough geopolitics as it is these days.
Yeah, exactly. I don't need to add to that debate, but I think France has got a history. I'll take France. It's a large country, but they've got a heritage of craftsmanship, skills, and being known for some of the best fashion in the world. And if you ask the French, they'll say they invented fashion design and couture, as they call it. So I think I think the reason France are so vehemently involved in this, I mean, it's Paris Fashion Week this week. It's always it's the most prestigious, they say, you know, that it's all it's very bound up with France, you know, fashion, a bit like champagne, you know, there are certain things, part of their national characteristics, and they want to fiercely protect their industry that they've got, which is very much, I do appreciate, at the high end of the fashion industry. But that's where the preservation of craftsmanship and skills comes in. And I think that's possibly the dimension that the French are coming from. I think Latvia is an interesting one, and Hungary. It surprised me when I found that data, to be quite honest. And I'm just imagining that it might be something to do with the culture and the attitude of the people in those countries. But in the EU as a whole, there has been much more of a push from an EU level on the EPR lobby. So, you know, obviously, you know, that's up to the EU as to how they mandate that in each country. But it sounds like there's some latitude, from what I can gather, into obviously each government is making their own decisions on that. I don't know if I've answered your question, actually.
No, you have actually, and actually it kind of segues nicely into, and I'll continue with you on this, in terms of sort of the key levers for shifting fashion brands towards a true circularity, and this element of storytelling and design, because I want to go into this area of kind of the consumer story and where this plays a big part, because so we've talked about a little bit about national things, innovation things, but this notion of how to integrate circular designs into the curriculum, fashion curriculum. What are the key stories do you think can we share to help consumers and also brands?
Talking about storytelling and heritage particularly, I think it's so important that brands that do have a real story to tell, because marketing usually quite often invents one, but I'm talking about brands that have really got a story to tell, and there are many in the UK, brands like John Smedley in the Midlands, John Smedley Knitwear, and a lot of the Scottish brands like Johnston's of Elgin, Alex Begg, Strathberry, etc., Harris Tweed. They've got it's built into their identity, and that's where the skills and the craftsmanship crosses over as well, and it's very much part of the brand identity. The problem I have with marketing is similar to the point that Lynn made, is that it unfortunately it turns itself into greenwashing a lot of the time. Every brand is now saying we're selling recycled polyester or something of the sort, and making it sound like a good thing, or this bag is made from recycled polyester. I saw on a major fast fashion carrier bag the other day on Oxford Street, and it irritated me because that's not what we need. That's not educating consumers well at all. But the story of a real brand and real textiles is really important to consumers, but equally that plays into consumers being given the opportunity to understand how to repair and where to get their brands repaired. I mean, I'll mention one brand. Marks and Spencers have actually done a great job recently. They've teamed up with it for a big mass market retailer. They've teamed up with a specialist repair company called Sojo. That's a real step in the right direction. It's helping consumers. If you've broken a zip, get it repaired. You don't have to throw it away and buy a new one, or get the hem taken up, or, put some kind of fabulous patch or embroidery over the hole. There are many ways to repair and recycle clothing, not just by throwing them away and recycling the raw material, turning it back into raw materials, or padding or wadding or stuffing, and that's a great thing. We can do so many different things, but specialist repairs is one of them. I haven't talked about the curriculum. Do you want me to do that briefly?
It's very briefly, be good. Yeah.
At Westminster, we're really committed to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals in our curricula, and that goes for the entire university, actually. You'd expect in fashion, we've taken it as far as we possibly can. We run, we do encourage students from day one to treat waste as a resource, and we have many projects that involve using waste materials or treating design as we run a denim project every year that is about using waste denim. We have a conscious fashion space where we invite brands in, and we run pop-ups for students that might be about specialist repairs. It might be about creating a brand, which is using recycled materials or reused materials. We're running a project with our science lab at the moment where they're looking at using food waste and turning it into new textiles. So they're working with fashion students there. And finally, on the heritage and the preservation bit, we have a renowned Westminster menswear archive. It's the only menswear archive in Europe. And we have thousands of garments there, which we've got catalogued, and we work very closely with many, many brands, particularly some Italian brands, and it's all about recording and preserving textiles and the documenting of certain types of product. And students use them as reference points and as inspiration, as do many brands that come to us and work with us, work with the archive. So we look at it on lots of different levels.
That's really, really fascinating. Thank you for sharing that. That's really, really helpful. I want to come to Lynn, and just actually there's a bit, because we've had previous conversations, and actually Virginia mentioned about this kind of the consumer care element, and we had an interesting chat about this in terms of professional repairs, local skills and training, how that seems to have kind of disappeared a little bit, and how really it's kind of quite important into this conversation. And then I want to talk to you about sort of your experience of local projects up in Scotland to help engage with communities. So could you just kind of go back a little bit on that consumer care element?
Thank you. So the first key challenge about consumer care is consumers don't know what they're wearing. And clothing technology is so sophisticated that, so for example, the autumn-winter collection of one well-known, low-value, high street brand that most consumers, a lot of consumers, that's their affordability benchmark. The autumn-winter collection was 100% polyester for their knitwear. And the technology, there's a lot of children and young people in the UK who have never tasted a carrot. There's a lot of people who have never felt natural fibre. So they have no idea. They think if something is soft and fluffy, it's a natural fibre. And they don't really think about it. And why would they? And they're relying on what they're buying to keep them warm, to keep them cool. And if you're wearing 100% polymer jumper and you're confused as to why is that jumper not doing its job? Why is it not keeping me warm? Or why am I in an environment and I'm sweating? What's going on? And so there is so much unknowns in terms of marketing to consumers about what they're wearing. And this problem of how this polyester ends up in the waste stream in the first place. So there is a key issue in terms of consumer care about what is the actual product that they're buying in the first place, and do they understand what they need in order to care for it, because it's a potentially low value fibre that's going to pill really quickly, it's going to wear really quickly in areas of the body, that relationship between the body and the garment. So consumer care, we're told a lot about repair, and repair is so important, but what exactly are we asking in ensuring that consumers are repairing? Because we haven't really, if we've got 60% of clothing's polymer based, anybody who understands clothing repair knows that repairing a pair of polymer leggings is a very different issue from repairing a wool jumper. And it requires a lot more skill and challenge. And the other idea is that this idea of affordability of repair, if you can't do a repair yourself, but it's amazing that M&S have this new partnership, that's brilliant, but it can end up that the cost of the repair is the same cost as a new garment. So therefore, why on earth would you repair what you've got when you could just buy something new? So this whole issue of cost, value, quality of a garment, and consumers being continuously hoodwinked into buying something that isn't working for them, and then getting the blame because they're discarding it in favour of something else because it's just not working. The whole system is skewed, in my opinion. And so the key challenge is then also with repairability and encouraging people to reuse and repair, is that needs a complete marketing overhaul. Because this word upcycling, recycling, if I see something upcycled or recycled, to be honest, I'm not that interested in it. If it's redesigned, if I know it's been redesigned with skill and quality, and it looks really good because it's been so with great quality post-consumer or post-industrial materials, then I'm much more interested. So this idea of what it is that we're actually doing to maintain and to keep garments in use needs a whole rethink. And that does need, when we talk about scale, there is a lot of conversations about scale. And the issue of the 60% polymer needing recycled, that absolutely needs to be talked about at scale. But what needs to be talked about one-to-one, in the home, in our communities, which is why it's so wonderful that Kingston is having this great event, is because we need to have these conversations at the kitchen table and make sure that everybody is aware of what they're wearing. And that way we start to ask questions. I am a pain in the neck. Every shop I go into, I ask the retail assistant, what is that? Do you know what that is? What's that say on the label? Do you know if that's wool? And if they go, oh, I don't know, I say, oh, would you ask your manager? And if the manager says, I don't know, I say, oh, could you ask the supervisor? Sorry, it's just it would be really great if I know. And if we were... all
Yeah.
doing that, brands would be wakening up. If as consumers were asking more questions, then brands really need to start answering.
Because I think I want to go to Vasileios because there's something about the fast ordering of clothing, which I think ties in a little bit. But I think it's very important this isn't blaming the consumer. This is making them a little bit more aware to make more decisions. And so that the fingers, if there are fingers pointing, it's definitely in terms of governance, in terms of policy, but also to the manufacturers. Because I'm really mindful that consumers don't feel, oh, blimey, I'm being picked upon because I've chosen this or that. But I think, again, as you say, with the digital passports, to go back to what you said earlier, that again, that's another kind of learning process. And we see it in different ways with the shopping bags at Tesco's or something like that, in terms of a bag for life or brown paper bags. There are other areas where people have learned to adapt. So I think that's really important.
Sorry, sorry to interrupt, but just to say I didn't answer your question in terms of how we are tackling this. And we did work with schools in Scotland to instill social research skills so that pupils had the opportunity to interview each other, to interview teachers, and to develop films and stories that help them to understand how to research and how to know what's in your clothing. Sorry to interrupt, but I realised I hadn't answered your question.
No, I'm glad that you shared that. I'm conscious of time, so I definitely want to get to Vasileios with this one. You mentioned in our previous conversations about this notion of people over-ordering and basically getting too much. And you gave a very interesting insight in terms of the technology of almost the way that producers are working to kind of shrink down this time. Would you mind sharing a little bit with our audience here, sort of where the technology is going with this? Because I think this is a really interesting area.
As we mentioned, one of the biggest problems is the overproduction. And this is happening because the companies, they don't know how many are going to be consumed. So if they produce 10, maybe only one is being consumed at the end. So we end up with 9 clothes not used at all. One solution for this one, and that's where they are going, many companies, is the on-demand production. So even for a single item, they produce it when it is needed. And as I mentioned, the technology is there. Many companies, big companies, car manufacturers, for example, in different domains, they can produce a car in 70 seconds. So, I mean, the technology is there. The problem, the reason we don't have it in Europe, it's that we need to have it in a large scale. But with the technologies coming from 2027, I think even small companies like SMEs should be able to automate in that level. There are some big companies, I don't want to mention now, for shoe manufacturers in Europe that do this one already, printing shoes on demand. And this technology, I think, will come in a few years, maybe with robotics, will be something that will automate a lot of pipelines in this process. And the on-demand production will need also something else. We need new business models, as was mentioned from different speakers before. So we need the business models that will have clothes as a service, or take back, or just in time manufacturing models. So all these things to come together, and if it happens correctly, will allow also small SMEs to be able to have this automation in that level.
Is there, crudely, where does this fit in terms of the financial element, in terms of the new technologies there? But is it sort of prohibitively expensive at the moment, or do you think this is a scalable thing, scalable kind of innovation, which can be really flexible and adaptable?
Yeah, in the past, we can see this level of automation only in very large companies like automotive companies that producing cars, so have all these automated factories. And the problem is the cost, because a small company cannot afford to go to this level of automation. But with humanoid robots and this kind of technology that is coming from 2027, it is expected to have to be in mass production from 2027. It will be the effect as we had with mobile phones. How was the world before mobile phones and after mobile phones? Many things changed. And in this way, many things will automate. And since the training and cost of these solutions will be quite low, maybe less than a car, so these SME companies will be able to automate the process and have this level of on-demand production without big costs.
Brilliant. Really fascinating. I think that's a really fascinating area that the technology could eventually start shifting these things and to make things a little bit more bespoke. I'm very conscious of time, so I'm going to start rounding this conversation up a little bit in terms of just getting from all our panelists. And I mean, I think we've covered a huge amount of ground here. There's so many different mechanisms and layers to this. So in terms of trying to simplify somehow this conversation, I want to get your view on terms of your vision for the future for this, in terms of the future of fashion in a climate resilient world. Where do you, what is your vision? And I'll start with you, Vasileios, first, and then I'll come to Ian. So give you some thinking time.
Yeah, my domain is in AI and robotics, so it will be technical, the vision. We expect to have a lot of changes in the way we do the recycling processing, the sorting processes, and all those kind of things will be automated. Already the university invested about $1 million robotics, and we already train robots to actually do the processes, to do the recycling process, and to in the future we'll try to scale it up. So a big factor will be there. And the other thing is also AI, artificial intelligence, that will allow the consumers to interact with the items, to check with the passport, what's happening, to ask questions and get information about the different materials and textiles that are used. So we have a different level of interaction in this process, and different technologies to solve this problem in large scale.
Amazing. Thank you very, very much. Ian, and then I'll come to Lynn and then to Virginia.
Yeah, I left out a lot of other things we were doing locally. I've put those in the chat. So the various
subject here.
we're doing. So I would encourage you to copy out my comments from the chat before the meeting closes and they're lost forever. Well, I mean, I think it needs a mixture. My vision, anyway, is a mixture really of national and local initiatives. I mean, central government in the end sets the regulations, sets the targets for local authorities, sets the taxation, and it also sets the import tariffs as well. And we do seem to be going into a world where there's more import tariffs. And in the past, certainly the UK has imposed quite high import tariffs on textiles and on clothing. At the local level, we'll encourage local initiatives to encourage repair and reuse if possible. As I mentioned earlier, we will have some kind of carbon requirement on us in terms of waste in the emissions trading scheme coming up. So there'll be more attention then by local authorities on the carbon aspect of it. And if textiles produce as many carbon emissions as been described, then clearly then local authorities will do something about it.
Thank you, Ian. Lynn, and then Virginia, to wrap this all up.
Thank you so much. So I think the future is local. It needs to be local, needs to be creative, innovative and enterprising. So just thinking about what other people have said, AI and robotics, how do we use AI and robotics at a very local level? So for example, Councillor Manders, back to that question, that issue of carbon versus volume. The main thing that people put in the household bin is underwear, and they put it in the household bin because they're embarrassed to put it in the clothing bank. And I imagine what I would love is if I could go into John Lewis, into haberdashery, and buy my own fibre processing tool that's made from really cool technology, that then if I really feel like I have a garment that is absolutely wasted, of no value to anybody, I could put it through my own processing machine and end up with a lovely flocking fibre that could be used for something else. And so that idea of how we harness technology, how we harness creativity for domestic solutions at a local level is really, for me, where it's at. I work with industry, I work on those big scaling challenges, etc., and that's fabulous. But the most exciting, creative and important part is local communities. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lynn. Virginia.
Thank you. I think I'd like to see a fashion industry that has got a transparent supply chain with inbuilt reuse. And that's obviously that's a very big ambition for the future. But I really want to see in the UK some kind of framework to join up all of the textile recycling. I think that's got to be the way forward for our supply chain and for the industry. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Virginia. 15, just made it. Can I just say a massive thank you to our panelists here today, and thank you so much for everybody who's attended. I really would like to give, again, a shout out to Joanna Rossi from the council and to Ian Manders, who's leading this side of the conversation. There's a lot of pressures going on for each respective council, but they are working incredibly hard to make it work and to make it practical, to inform us, to guide us, and to bring these kind of events together. So a huge thanks for that. And to, as I say, to all of you as attendees, there's a lot of people who are trying to make this work better. But so I hope you have learned something a wee bit new from today. I certainly have in the conversations today and also previously. So I appreciate your time with this. This has been recorded, so I'll leave it to Joanna to kind of circulate at some other point or where it'll be posted. But again, thank you so much for your time, and I hope our paths will cross again in the near future. Thank you very much all. Mind yourselves. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.